People don't fear change. People fear uncertainty because they can't ensure that they will be safe. And this is a vital distinction for the modern leader. People don't fear failure. People fear unacceptable consequences of failure. And this is another vital distinction for today's leader. And why do I say it's vital? Because in our network disrupted ideas economy, a business cannot compete as a predictable machine with a top team taking decisions and pulling levers. The business must be a living organism. And if a business is a living organism, then fundamental transformation must be taking place at an individual cellular level within that organism. The thinking and actions of networked, innovating people is what will drive the transformation, is what must change. So the leader must accurately understand the needs of the human, rather than relying on industrial age sayings about people fearing and resisting change and our iceberg being melting. Post-pandemic transformation must be people-centred. And in our volatile, uncertain, competitive environment, transformation is clearly no longer a stressful 3-month, 12-month journey from state A to state B. It's a way of working. And so it's critical that our ability to transform is sustainable, is designed into the organisation and taught as a professional skill to our people and to our leaders. Post-pandemic transformation must be sustainable over the long term. So today I'll bring 2 decades of experience in delivering change globally at all levels of the organisation. Studies in psychology and neuroscience of rapid change. My personal experiments in working with this material, in learning and unlearning to become a jockey within 12 months of sitting on a horse, in taking the British free dive record, the first past 100 metres under the ocean without a tank. Both merely large-scale departures from the comfort zone to deliver transformation, whilst also delivering the day job. We always have to perform whilst we transform. And I'll also bring a very hectic 3 months of working in partnership with senior leaders around the world to help their people cope with the pandemic and the lockdown. And I'll bring that all to a sharp focus to argue for a clear manifesto for sustainable, people-centred transformation. And I think you'll really be excited by it. Why do I think that? Because it provides a huge support to our work to stop the damage we're doing to the mental health of our people. If we don't support our people to deliver this constant, rapid change, which has got personal risk attached for them, and we do not make it possible for them to sustain that rate of change, build an environment within which change is the norm and is possible, we injure them. I'll return to this theme. Why will you find it exciting? Because it requires a transformation of engagement at all levels, and we know that engagement is a significant challenge. It's right for the competitive health of the business, therefore the future survival. And because it builds a compelling new architecture for transformation. The application of design thinking to the human needs and the sustainability required provides a clarity and a blueprint where there's traditionally been confusion and fluff about why change fails. And it becomes clear that this architecture must have symmetry. We cannot serve the needs of the people without altering their leaders and their operating environment. And we cannot merely focus on the leaders and the operating environment without giving the people the skills to deliver transformation. So let's start putting people at the centre of transformation. In 1970, Alvin Toffler imagined the world that you and I would live in. He predicted that the illiterate of the 21st century would not be those who could not read or write, but those who could not learn, unlearn and relearn. And as much as learning or unlearning the facts around a new operating normal or technology, he was talking about learning and unlearning our beliefs, our assumptions and our biases, how the world should work, what's safe and what isn't, and then adapting our thinking and actions, and of course, learning new skills where necessary to move forward. And this is where we unlearn and relearn and test our perceptions of the likelihood of failure, of the consequence of failure, of how our leaders are responding, of how the customer is responding. So let's keep that change for the individual, that learning and unlearning, very simple for a moment. If you're going to change at work, you're going to have to think new thoughts and do new things to deliver a new result. But this means you have uncertainty in the place where you need the most certainty, because it's feeding your family. You can't be sure that you'll succeed in what you're doing. It's untested, which means you have a risk of failure. Now think back to when you were 14 or 15 years of age. Did you have a mother or father or whoever cared for you at this stage in your life who would wave you off to school in the morning and say, "Bye-bye, my darling. Be sure and take a risk or two at school today. Remember that you have your own unique, valuable, precious perspective on the world, and do not be afraid to share that with the class. Don't worry what they might think of you or whether you get it all wrong." And in my travels, in the days when I used to travel only in San Francisco, would a hand go up in answer to this question, unless there was a stray Californian in an EMEA audience. We were not brought up to take risk. We were brought up to thrive and survive in the industrial age, an age where it was our job to stay safe, to feed our families, to show up on time, to get it right, first time, to the satisfaction of an authority figure who could pull the lever and train us in what right looked like. The requirement for devolved decision-making, for individual accountability and risk, was very low in this environment. This was organisation as machine. Here we had a leadership, a top team, that governed a bureaucracy, and that bureaucracy controlled silos, and those silos did what they were designed to do. So of course, naturally, we were prepared for this system. We were lined up in rows, and we were taught to get it right first time, to the satisfaction of an authority figure who could judge what right is and how that should look. And now, of course, we're working in this entirely different world. We're working in this network devolved economy. We have to take decisions at the front line where it matters. This is the world in which the store manager of your local Primark, a fashion store, that store manager is taking the stocking decisions about what they will hold and how they will hold it for the store, not the regional manager, because only they have that local level of knowledge. So we're not a machine. We are now looking at organisation as organism. We're looking at the leadership in the middle, connected to teams which are interconnected again, of course, and able to operate as autonomous units to deliver a clear and defined strategy, if, of course, that clear and defined strategy is in place. Individuals are then networked beyond that again and taking decisions and building relationships, and then of course out to supplier and customer, those relationships evolve again. So you can see graphically how that hierarchy has shifted, the role of leader has shifted. In order to build agility into this situation, we're looking at a very different model and a very different requirement upon our people, which is why this idea of people-centred and sustainable change is so critical to create a competitive modern organisation. But we're not changing how we train our young people. We're still lining them up to get it right first time to the satisfaction of an authority figure. I'm calling this industrial age lag. We still show up to work, or we used to until very recently, at 9 o'clock at the same place, in a world where we can't sustain our transport needs. We ask everybody to come in, to gather, to spend maybe 3 hours travelling every day, to be at one place, to be supervised in their work, before all departing again at exactly the same time of day. We're still seeing industrial age lag in many areas. Now, we have a natural human rate of change. This is not moving at any great speed. This is what we're born with, our adaptability. And we are a wonderful, hugely adaptable species. And then, of course, we have the rate of environmental change, competitive forces, technological forces, a pandemic. Our requirement as individuals to manage, process and deliver a change in thinking and action in order to continue to deliver the right result, which we have had to gauge and assess, of course, in collaboration. And we have here a gap, which is a skills gap. We need to enhance our natural abilities so that we can do the transformation, do the change more effectively and, because we're trained, sustainably. But I don't think we're filling that gap with this literacy of the 21st century. I think we're filling this gap with, we have mental health issues, we have engagement issues, so we must engage. We have mental health issues, so we must put a sticking plaster over them. Forgive me being blunt. But this year's 2020 Health and Wellbeing in the Workplace survey by the CIPD, no coincidence, number 1 recommendation of 3 is that we build preventative measures to not damage people in the first place, where we're focusing way too much on helping people who've been damaged. Recommendation number 2, by the way, is that our managers receive training in how to support people's well-being, because they are the primary point of contact for most folk and are the most impactful upon their daily experience of work. We can fill this curve. So it's critical to the business and to our people's well-being that we fill this gap, and we can, but fill it with the literacy of the 21st century. And this is possible now. All the research and the learning is in place. So let's scratch the surface of this together, and I'll show you what I mean. We can teach people that they have a unique ability to deliver incredible purpose, to collaborate, leave legacy, make a contribution, hit objectives, delay gratification, but that lives side by side with a system shared by the housefly to protect us from risk. And we can teach people that the rapid decision about whether to operate in response to any incoming stimulus or our own challenges that we think through ourselves, the decision on whether to operate on purpose or on process is taken very fast at a non-conscious level, but that they can reverse that decision to move from an emotional, process-driven response to purpose consciously. Once they have the manual, it is their decision. But most of us are not aware of this. We can help our people understand that when their process takes control, it has direct access to their entire biochemistry, their emotional system. It can change how they feel, their hormones, their neurotransmitters, in far less than a heartbeat. We can teach them that their untested narratives, assumptions, beliefs and biases about change or about the boss is as powerful in creating any difficult emotional response or well-being issues as anything that change or the boss themselves might have ever brought into their world. And that they have the power to manage this response under pressure. This clearly needs the symmetry to be in place. They have to be able to meet bosses and leaders and encounter change in an environment where this is possible. This is the symmetry. We'll return to that idea. We can teach people that change, which is vital for them and for the business and for their roles, brings uncertainty. And that uncertainty brings anxiety. And that managing anxiety is therefore part of a healthy life, part of growth, part of challenge. We can even teach people that anxiety is actually an evolutionary superpower to be excited about possessing and used as the high-performance tool that it is. A kind of way where our emotions almost magically seem to predict the future and focus our attention on what we should be thinking about. But then we have to help people understand that there are 3 potential responses to this revving engine of anxiety. And here we don't help them. And so, of course, things will escalate into well-being problems. We can teach them that they can engage the clutch, use all of the emotional energy and focus that the anxiety is producing for what it's there for, what that energy is designed for, to help people to move forward, act, and solve the problem. We can help people understand that there are areas where they have to turn the engine off. It's not their anxiety. They can't do anything about this. It's out of their control. And that is the only time when mindfulness, living in the moment, being able to accept a situation that is messy and that we don't like and we feel we ought to be able to resolve, but intellectually we cannot, the only time when that becomes a key tool in managing our mental health. Or, of course, we can rev the engine. We can get deep in the drama. We can get excited around the water cooler on this. We can find someone to blame for how it happened, and we can find doom in the future about how it won't work. Now, how do we teach this? It doesn't work in the classroom. 20 years of our work in the field and all of the current research suggests that people need to meet the edge of their comfort zone, not see it on a slide. Now, that doesn't mean we have to dangle people off a rope on a cliff face. It means that we need to support people and help them get to the edge of the comfort zone in a safe environment, in a coaching environment, which, by the way, doesn't need to be one-to-one coaching. We've done this with groups from 2 to 500. We need to help them at that stage to uncover the beliefs, the assumptions, the biases that they have, and help them own that. The beliefs that created that edge of the comfort zone. See it as fictional, see it as their own making, and then take them from purpose to process when they get to that emotional stage. And this is one of the most exciting aspects of our work and our research, because it's incredibly simple to achieve. It appeals to human nature. Your people aren't worried about changing. People in the 21st century are worried about standing still and being overtaken. Doing this work delivers an immediate mindset change and gives people a thrilling ownership and confidence that they have the skills to be able to move forward and transform. So we've not found a more effective way to teach these skills than planning the actions required to deliver the strategy and pace, backed up by the vision and the mission, supported and key to that being the environmental, social and governmental areas that have been adopted by the top team. Those compass points that mean people can work out where they're going. So we haven't found a more effective way of teaching these skills than planning the actions that will be required for that person in their world to deliver the strategy. And planning these actions will, if we keep pushing, will take people right to the edge of the comfort zone, the place where growth and change happens, the penny drops. And then at that place, we can analyse with them in the room what it was that created that edge. What's the block that's there? And then we can push on that and see if it's true or not. If there's something we can explore, they can explore to find out what's stopping them at that place. Often it's the boss, their perception of the boss. And the great news is that it's easy, simple, peer-to-peer coaching that provides the most powerful way of accessing these beliefs, assumptions and biases, the learning and unlearning, the place where we discover the literacy of the 21st century. Now, we call this process of providing the DNA to each individual cell, we call this process becoming aware. Getting to a stage where each individual knows how to be accountable and wants to own it and deliver it, knows how to be well, how to look after their own well-being, how to show up in a state where they can perform and transform, but also how to push back and have intelligent adult discussions with those around them. And this is vital to the symmetry. We'll explore this in just a moment. Where they are agile, they understand and have the tools for change. They know what anxiety is and how to work within it and see it as an evolutionary superpower. They know what purpose is and process is and how to transfer to one to the other. And they're able to take feedback saying, I think you've just gone into process? Are you sure you're with me on purpose? And once the whole team has this vocabulary, we see huge strides being taken. Resilience, the ability to understand where one is going and take some knocks and overcome setbacks along the way, to have good days and bad days, and to share that collaboratively. And finally, the whole process is incredibly engaging. Not only is my ability to operate in the 21st century clearly at the center of what the organization is willing to support me in, but also I'm being offered the opportunity to reflect upon, discuss, and then contribute my unique personal addition to our delivery of the strategy, to our environmental goals, our sustainability goals, our social goals, and our governance considerations. So that's the process for us, is moving to a place from obedience and into ownership. So that becomes the path that we invite the individual people, the cells in the organism, to go along. But as you can see, this is going to release a lot of energy, and there is one potential block once we've worked in this area, which is why that symmetry, which often gets ignored, is so critical. We can't just work here and ignore these people's needs and their education, or we're constantly just creating warfare, which is why it stops in the middle management, the famous permafrost. I'm not so sure in the industrial age model that we can bring that intelligently into the 21st century. So we can't just work here. We have to also ensure that our leaders are able to cope with the energy release here. These people now want to be engaged. They believe they've got a part to play. They believe they can work with you to move forward. Now, clearly, this does not mean that every idea coming out of this work here has to be accepted. This is about a new age of discussion. What is critical, however, is that we don't see the biggest antidote to mindset shift that we've experienced over the years as a team, which is that these people just get squashed in the first conversation, and that is the end. It has to be a supportive, explanatory process. If this idea won't work, go own and be accountable for fixing the reasons which we've just agreed together as to why it can't work. Off you go. Come back and let's talk again. Speak with the right people, get the other inputs, and let's talk again. So it's vital that our team leaders are able to receive the energy and then work with the individuals. So the most common belief that gets exposed when we're working with the individuals is that my boss is here to judge me, that's their job, not to support me. My boss wouldn't allow us to do X or Y or Z. I don't have the authority to do X or Y or Z. And it's classic industrial age lag. And it's vital that it is tested by the individuals, because this is a perception that is keeping them safe and keeps them relaxed. And they have to be able to test it. So after this event with the individuals, what we find is team leaders get asked for a lot of one-to-one time. And if this work is done with the top 100, to support them in owning and delivering the plan, taking a new level of accountability to free up the top team, then that top team tend to have a very long and stimulating evening of conversations ahead. And that conversation will be focused on one word: permissions. And I'll return to this as we close the presentation. The new role of senior leadership in creating a permissions-based, action-orientated decision architecture within the organisation to allow that organism we saw to flourish. So it's critical that the leaders, when they receive everybody, can pass the test, because industrial age lag will cut both ways. And so we're looking at asking the leaders to move from a supervisory role, which may still be, of course, transactionally appropriate in certain situations, as might obedience, but as an overall approach, that shift from supervisory role up to performance coach role, in order to help us move into this quadrant here. I'll give this, make this available on the website. You're very welcome to download it or email me, and I'll forward the model over to you. Now, when the leaders are given the new tools and a new vocabulary that helps them see when individuals are acting or speaking from emotional process and not from executive function purpose, and when that's a shared vocabulary that individuals also understand in the team and are willing to have that open conversation within the team, then challenges can be resolved very fast, and challenges can be resolved at a new level. So, before I bring us all to a very personal conclusion, I'd like to zoom out now and place this discussion in the wider context of the organisation as organism. Because as we see here, the individual needs their part, or we're going to have dissymmetry. The team leader needs their part, or we're going to have dissymmetry. But that needs to exist within a carefully designed, agile organisation. So our design thinking around the organisation has to support sustainable, people-centred change in order to deliver purpose, values, ethics, and the strategy. So that's our next piece of work, which we'll only just touch upon today. And then finally, to complete the circle, that top team has to be entirely engaged, because there must be no chink at that level. And it's very rare to begin a change process with a top team that has that level of cohesion, wherever they think they may be as they start. There's always a degree of self-learning and work involved to bring that to its conclusion. So, before I bring us to a very personal conclusion, let's bring our discussion back to the wider context. Once you put people and an organism that can sustain its regeneration, its evolution, and its transformation at the centre of the discussion, a very natural order flows from that place. We find that instead of placing the top team at the top, pulling levers, or at the bottom, supporting and serving as leaders, they actually have a role in a very different part of the pyramids. We begin, of course, with shared vision and purpose, because for these folk, delivering change, if that isn't in place, they haven't got a compass point. They have to come back always and ask to be task-led. But once this is in place, we have our direction set. But that's not enough. As we know, we're living in a very complex world with huge levels of engagement across society and a shifting idea of what the organisation as an entity is there to deliver. So now we're going to focus on ESG, our environmental, social and governance standards, and we're going to have values and ethics that are brought into that. And that then will give rise to our strategy to deliver our objectives. Only when we have that in place can we begin to align the top team, their cultures and their roles, specifically to deliver this. They may be the people with consultation, of course, who agree all of this. So this is a cyclical process. But unless this is in place, this team cannot function. And then again, unless it's aligned, these people cannot trust it. It is not a secure foundation. It is a shifting power-based foundation. And I can't trust that to take change as a servant leader, as a performance coach at the local level, or as an individual. So these elements are absolutely critical if the change is to be sustained, ongoing, and if we're not going to have people coming back out of quite right levels of uncertainty, very, very rational levels of uncertainty, seeking permissions. And then what we would say is, across this line of symmetry becomes our decision architecture, an action facilitating decision architecture. Because whilst these decisions are muddy and unclear, people cannot deliver the transformation required. It's what comes out of every workshop that we run, is that these folk haven't got the confidence in this to take the decisions that these people are asking them more and more loudly to get on with taking. So we have to fill that gap. And to us, there are four major components of that. One is data flow. This is a large organism. This is like the traffic going up and down the nervous system along the neurons in a human body. This data has to be in place, and we're working now with partners. We can produce beautiful platforms to provide that data. There must be very clear permissions, and these must be under review. Permissions and boundaries. Where am I safe to operate? And there must be very clear and constant communication about this. So there's never any doubt that this is fixed and stable and we're doing it. And of course then we're going to put process in place to make sure that our processes, our other technical systems, etc. are mapping and facilitating everything that's happening here and that's going within the decision architecture. We'll have a layer of technology, of course, enabling all of this. It deserves its own layer. And then we've got the teams interacting, as we saw on the organism map at the beginning, led by servant leaders, performance coaches, people facilitating the great work of others. Those others being now our aware people with the DNA, maturity and understanding and education to manage their emotions and processes to deliver change within a sustainable environment. So before we come to that very personal close that I spoke about, please do download your copy of the Symmetry Manifesto for Sustainable People-Centered Change at symmetry-international.com. And I've included there for you the slides and models I've shown during this presentation. And I've also included a case study. This was written by Gary Hoffman, who was the chief executive appointed by the government to return the collapsed bank Northern Rock to private ownership and profitability after its collapse during the noughties. And we worked together to support him changing from machine more to organism during that time. And you can read about that also in my book, Taming Tigers. It's the case studies reproduced from the book. Let's go free diving. A free dive is the most wonderful activity. It is not an extreme sport. There's no adrenaline being released during a free dive. By the way, this is my record attempt, successful one that I failed the day before I succeeded here. You can hold your breath and come with me if you wish. And if you start feeling weird, please breathe, keep yourself safe. It's an exercise in mindfulness, in managing emotions. I must be entirely aware. If you remember that phrase from that acronym from the model earlier. I have to be entirely accountable. I'm not relying upon anybody else, although I have a superb team around me on the surface who are taking huge care of me and can intervene in the dive to support me. I have to be entirely well and able to keep my well-being throughout this transformation. I have to be agile, I have to be able to respond to any situation. I must be resilient. I developed a 5-minute breath hold during 8 months of training. I started with the breath hold that probably you have today of around about 30-40 seconds. Within 8 months I had 5 minutes for a 2.5 minute, you can see the clock ticking here, a 2 minutes and 6 seconds, 2 minutes 6 seconds dive, which was to be achieved. So this was a very aware exercise for the diver, in this case for me. There's something else that's critical about this, and I want to leave us with this note. I have to, at the outset of this dive, take a decision that I'm seeing it through. I'm going through all the difficulties and challenges in order to get to the other side. I'm leaving the comfort zone. We don't even give this a name, do we, the place outside? Let's call it the confusion zone. I'm going to cross that confusion zone and I'm going to hit the new state that I'm creating. I have to commit to that. I can't think I'm going to go to 80 meters, then I'll stop and see how I feel, because I won't feel like continuing if I invite my process to take over from my purpose at 80 meters under the ocean. I'm under 9 times the Earth's atmospheric pressure. It's 1 atmosphere to outer space in terms of the change. My lungs have compressed down to the size of my clenched fist. This is entirely healthy. Humans can do it very easily, but it means that my diaphragm has been sucked up, the muscle that separates tummy from chest, sucked up into my chest cavity, which means that I look spectacular at 80, 90 meters under the ocean. But sadly, we can't stay like that. We return to normal when we head to the surface. cannot be awarded the record by the world governing body judge here unless I know I can pass through, I have the resilience, I have the support to pass through, and the commitment to pass through any emotional challenges I may encounter along the way. And I think it's the same for us in this work. We have to commit wholeheartedly to the journey of creating the agile organism that can thrive in the post-pandemic world. Thank you for your time. Every success.